Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Grafman. I'm the Director of Short Form Content in VPAL, but I'm here today to facilitate this awesome discussion. Before we do that, we have a little bit of just everyone sitting, and we're going to actually have everybody just stand up and move their bodies a little bit, a really quick exercise just to get your minds and your bodies in motion. So I love how eager this group is. These are a bunch of gold stars for everyone. So we're going to be, let's see, you came to this session. We know you're interested in empowering students in the age of knowledge abundance and AI. Within that context, which of the following are you most interested in or grappling with? Please walk to the location that represents that concept. So the first set of concepts, modes of learning, we've got embodied and experiential in the back there. We've got social and dialogue. I'm guessing it's over there. And we've got digital immersion over here. So move to the thing that's just sort of, don't overthink it, just follow your body. And interestingly, take a moment, observe the distribution. We'll let the photographer snap this. And now we're going to move again. We're going to do topic number 2, student attributes. We've got agency, we've got discernment, and we've got curiosity. Go and move, please. We're not as evenly distributed this time, I'm noticing. The weight is tilting this way. All right, the last group, student relationship to knowledge. We've got student as interpreter, student as collaborator, and student as challenger. Move your bodies, vote with your feet. Oh, thank you. Okay. Give yourselves a pat on the back, round of applause. Come sit down, please. And now we can get to talking. Sitting next to me is Gloria Tam. Gloria is a faculty member at the Harvard Extension School, where she teaches creating effective learning design in the age of generative AI. I have some colleagues who are taking the class, and they're having a great time. It's good, hard stuff, they said. Prior to this role, she served as the director of online course design and pedagogy at the Harvard Division of Continuing Education, where she led a team that collaborated with faculty at Harvard Extension School and Harvard Summer School to co-create impactful learning designs. Gloria's expertise lies in educational innovation and the science of learning. Next, we've got Edward Clapp. Edward is a principal investigator at Project Zero, a research center here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. Edward's interests include creativity and innovation, design and maker-centered learning, contemporary approaches to arts teaching and learning, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And last but not least, Jeff Wilson. Jeff's the director of the Harvard Law School Writing Center, a Shakespeare scholar, and editor-in-chief of the journal Public Humanities. From 2022 to 25, as instructional design lead in Harvard's Office of the Vice Provost for Advances in Learning, also known as VPAL, he created courses for Harvard Online. Jeff's passions include helping students do public writing. Thank you all for joining today. Again, thanks to everyone for joining us today. We're going to have just to let everyone know the agenda, we're going to spend some time in dialogue. I've got some questions for the panelists. They'll answer them, but also let the conversation flow as it wishes, and we'll have time at the end for questions. So to start with, Edward, I'm going to start with you. Let's start with the student in mind, the student attributes. Of these concepts, which speaks to you the most explicitly as it relates to your work?
Thank you. Well, first, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to start by talking about student agency. So one of the projects that I've worked for over a decade at Project Zero has been a project called Agency by Design. And what that project looks for, or looks at, is the concept of design and making in education. And it's easy to think that if we're talking about design, or if we're talking about making, we're building things and constructing things, and indeed we are doing that. But the core principles of the project are to support young people in not only being the consumers of their experiences, but in being the creators of their experiences. And that's what really is at the heart of design and making, if you think about it. And one of the things that we talk about is supporting young people in having what we call a sensitivity to design. So being sensitive to the design dimensions of their world. And an inherent principle there is that too often we go through our daily lives and we just passively consume design. So if you just kind of close your eyes and open them again and just looked around the room, design is everywhere. We constantly engage with design, but we don't critically interrogate design. And design isn't just about the stuff in our world. So indeed, the stuff in our world is designed. But more importantly, the systems that we engage with are designed. So we have this idea that not only do we passively engage with the design stuff in our world, we also passively engage with systems that we're a part of. And if we could develop agency in terms of our stuff and the systems that we interact with, then we can support young people in having the sense of individual and collective agency. You don't have to be the consumer of the things that you're a part of. You don't have to be the consumer of the systems you're a part of. And if we really think about this core principle that we call maker empowerment of how to empower young people to be the designers, the shapers of their worlds, we have to come at it from this systems-based perspective. Because the stuff that we are a part of, that we participate with and we engage with, that stuff is a system too, made up of subsystems, situated within supersystems, but the systems we engage with ourselves are systems. And we can think ourselves as makers, designers, creators within those bigger systems. So that's my kickoff with individual and collective agency.
That was fabulous. In my mind, it connects to what Todd Rogers was saying earlier today about the matrix, just seeing things in different dimensions. Like you're giving these students a new sense of how the world exists around them.
But it can't teach you Kung Fu in 8 seconds.
No, you cannot. Not yet. All right, so my next question is for Gloria. I know you teach both professional and adult learners on AI in education, as well as undergraduate students in the fields of business and product development. Which for you is the most important student attribute, and does it differ in these different contexts?
Sure. I need a mic. I don't have one of those. The attribute that I chose was actually discernment over there, but I just want to build on what Edward was saying on agency. Particular when you say we're not just a consumption of learning. So when I think about agency, one concept that really resonates with me is contextualized agency. So when you think about your learning environment, right, like a lot of times you're thinking of like a lot of things are fixed. I have this physical classroom over here, it's fixed. It can be a digital learning, that Zoom, that learning portal, that learning platform that I use. This class size of 25 people I interact with. You either do pair here or groups of 3 there. A lot of these things, so the social aspect of it is also designed by the instructor. But what if some of these things can be more malleable? So when you think about fish, right, and in particular, this is not just any fish. This is a fast fish. This is one of the fastest fish. This is a sailfish. And when you put the fish in the native environment, right, the sea, whatever, what it does is when it swims, it creates these like vortexes, right, with its fin to propel it to swim, to accelerate the swimming, to make it seem so easy to swim fast, right? And I think this is like the kind of thing we need to think about for us, for our learners. How do you create this? How do you foster this? More malleable environment, and it can be things like they could come to the instructors, tutors for feedback at the right time, right, proactively. It can be they find their student collaborators or student peers, right, group. It can be emotionally regulate themselves for the learning, right? Things like that, or changing the physical environment. So how do you encourage learners or empower them to change the context? And this is actually work from, I don't take credit of it, it's actually from HGSE also, from Tina Gossa. We invited her. She has a class. She cannot join today. But this concept about learning like fast fish, contextualized agency really speaks to me. I just shared some example from my class. I teach AI in learning, right? Learning design at Harvard Extension School. So one of the things that Mara is here is my teaching assistant. So we have final capstone, right? And the kind of assessment philosophy for us is more, I would call it more trending towards contract grading. So as long as they satisfy some participation and they submit some reflection for metacognition and they do a few mini design challenges, the final capstone is actually a lot about agency. They can choose any 3 themes from the 15 weeks of themes that they like. For some students, it might be education and gaming that Mario is going to teach tomorrow. It might be the Vygotsky social learning theory that they want to apply with AI in the learning design. So they get the agency to choose. They can do it individually or they can find a group to do it. I focus more on process, not just on the outcome deliverable. So a lot of these like small design choices, how can you do to foster agency? I think this is something we can think about a little bit more. So that's agency. Discernment is actually the word that I want to talk more about. And the reason is, for me, discernment is the bridge between information and knowledge and wisdom. And today's title is like beyond information. Like we have so much information at hand. Our students all get ChatGPT, Gemini, Cloud, all these like information from the LMs. Some of you may know, this week Meta has these kind of second generation AI glasses, so you can see everything. So information is at your fingertips or in your eyeball, whatever you want to say it. So it's everywhere. Information is instant. It is also abundant and I would say ambient is everywhere, right? So how do you think about making sense of the information is what I think is really important in this age. I give you an example. At DCE, we have, I led in the last semester a group of 15 to 20 faculty in an initiative called DCE Bot Club. So we help them incorporate chatbot into the program. And one of the instructor teaches evolutionary psychology. And among the many topics, he talks about the concept, the debate of nature versus nurture, for example. And he has this amazing chatbot. He actually has all the 15 weeks prior semester lecture with the caption and text. So he put this in as a knowledge base. So it's a really well-trained chatbot with all the caption and the text of the lecture, not just the slides. But when he tested the bot, still, the chatbot was drawing all the information from the training data, the corpus of text that is out there in the internet used to train this model. So a lot of myth about that nature versus nurture concept, which is exactly the things that he debunked in like many lectures, but the model didn't draw upon it, even though the instruction is good. So of course, in this case, he is the subject matter expert, and we fixed it. We changed the instruction, a few more iterations, all good, right? But if you think about the bigger question is, all our students get access to this chatbot. Information is there, and they are not the subject matter expertise a lot of the times. So how do we cannot monitor 24/7. How do we foster that? For me, discernment is like the ability to make judgment, the capacity to perceive truth, right, versus what is not truth, or also recognize things that are like not as obvious, right, like gray area, and how do you go about it? And I think in this age, it is more and more important for us to foster discernment. I mean, agency and curiosity is great, but I think this is critical. And it's not just critical thinking. It's also like the values and ethics behind wise judgment, right, behind wisdom. I don't know exactly how. I think there's a lot of good tips here. But a few things that I do, like in my class in AI and learning, just because of the topic, we have a lot of Socratic dialogue. We don't just teach functional literacy. Like I think it's really important to talk about the ethical aspects, the decision-making literacy. I hear other discipline, working with faculty in business and management, for example, a lot of case studies, right? So nowadays people can just take ChatGPT and, crack the case right away. So I hear practices like intentionally inject some error or bias in the case and get students to like spot the bias, right? Foster that kind of skills. That is another one. In the earlier panel, they talk about like discovery, learning, inquiry. One of the DCE faculty, he teaches creativity and innovation. And he has this arc of the entire 15 weeks, which is on like a wicked problem, which is like the United Nations 17 SDG goals. So thinking about like how you can put students in that kind of more uncertainty, ambiguity, and wicked problem in the subject domain, which is like maybe design thinking, like divergent, convergent problem solving and creativity, but he puts it into a wicked problem context. So these are some of the things that I care about, and I think both of these attributes are really important.
Although I will speak, but is there anything you guys want to say in reaction? Just giving you a pause? No. I have to say, I appreciate thinking about fostering discernment and connecting that to being aware of the design around you. Just again, seeing these, it's the invisible structures and how it's shaping your work and shaping your world is really key. Jeff, let me go to you now. I understand you have a very interesting public knowledge project that's ongoing on the topic of Shakespeare that puts students in a central role in knowledge creation. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
So 2014 to 2022, I taught in the Harvard College Writing Program. I taught the Why Shakespeare section. There was once a meme went around about how to fake being a Harvard student, and one of the things was to say, you're in the Shakespeare exploit section. Oh my God, it's so hard. So it was entirely by accident, but it's Thanksgiving 2018, and usually there are 2 class sessions after Thanksgiving in the semester, and this semester, because of a quirk in the calendar, there happened to be 3 class sessions after Thanksgiving. And so what we had was at the end of this semester, they had their term papers that they've written 10-page papers about Shakespeare's reception in a modern situation, and we had really, really well-developed term papers, and we had 75 minutes with this extra class session on our hands. And so I said, we're going to try a little experiment here. You're going to write the most epic in-class essay of your life. And in 75 minutes, you're going to take your 10-page, heavily footnoted version of your argument and turn it into a public-facing op-ed, and we'll just see what happens. And so we did this, and then about 2 weeks later, the first of these public Shakespeare essays gets published. So it was Iman Lavery, writing in a venue called Public Seminar, publishes a piece on Othello and school shootings, talking about the intersections of racism and sexism with public violence. Then come 25 additional essays from these first-year college students with titles such as Surreptitious Insurrection, Shakespeare and the Aesthetics of Revolt in Post-Civil War Nigeria, Disney Meets Shakespeare, The Bard and Bollywood, An Unexpected Concertmaster, How Shakespeare Influenced the Romantic Era, Shakespeare on Helicopter Parenting, that one's about Coriolanus, Black Lives Matter and the Public Leaders, Much Ado About Nothing, and Black Girl Magic and Toni Morrison's Desdemona. And for me, the most fascinating part of this, thinking about agency, but also embodied learning, was seeing these first-year college students, none of whom were going to go on to be Shakespeare scholars, bringing obsessions, interests, kind of hidden expertise that they had just by having virtue of lived their lives and the things that they were interested in, shifting from consumers of knowledge that someone else had created into being creators of knowledge that previously didn't exist in the world. And so setting up a structure to put them in place to be able to do that was really satisfying, and it ended up being a sort of a 5-year project in which a handful of these students published some really fascinating essays. We hear all the time stories about this essay went on someone's syllabus, or this essay ended up inspiring someone's graduate education. Amazing to think that these are first-year college students that are writing these.
Just curious, why Shakespeare?
Oh, crap. So for the longest time, my answer to this question when people would ask it was, I teach the course because I don't know the answer. And we heard a little bit about that this morning, right? That there's value in defining really well a question that you currently can't answer and teaching a course about it so that we can work together as a class. So the Why Shakespeare course was about Shakespeare's manifestations in the modern world. We took what I called an economic approach to it, not economic in the financial sense, but economic in the sense of what does Shakespeare supply that satisfies some demand that the modern world has. So like, why Shakespeare? Of all these options, for who's going to be the English language great literary writer. Why is it that Shakespeare was chosen? And okay, so sorry for this, but this is about to become Hilt Conference Taylor's version for one hot second, because we need to pause to appreciate. Thank you all for tearing yourselves away from your Taylor Swift listening parties today. Taylor Swift had a new album come out today. The first track on the album is called The Fate of Ophelia. So this is a reference to Shakespeare's play Hamlet. It's a really fascinating song. So it starts out with... It's basically a love letter to Travis Kelce. So the song starts out talking about how you, on a megaphone, said you wanted to date me. And this disrupted the place that I was at in life, Taylor sings, which she had sort of committed herself to melancholy, that she was not going to find love. And then she says, you saved me from the fate of Ophelia. And for folks who know that the Hamlet play, the allusion to Ophelia is actually a little bit jarring, because the fate of Ophelia, it ends, Ophelia is jilted by Hamlet, and she goes mad, which Shakespeare chooses to express by having Ophelia sing songs, and Taylor's sort of connecting herself to that. And then Ophelia ultimately commits suicide in a very tragic way. And so Taylor Swift is not simply saying you saved me from that, but in doing so is also characterizes Travis Kelce as kind of the anti-Hamlet. So all of Taylor's previous boyfriends become Hamlets, these kind of like cerebral, brooding, melancholy princes. And Travis Kelce is this like fun-loving jock over here who saves Taylor from the fate of Ophelia in that way. It's also a fascinating allusion back to the song that made Taylor Swift, which is called Love Story, which is about a riff on Romeo and Juliet, where she, in Love Story, it's, marry me, Juliet, we'll never have to be alone, which is like an amazingly bad reading of the Romeo and Juliet play. A play which is all about, like, this is the wrong way to love someone, because that's going to end in the tragic deaths of these two young kids. So there's been evolution in Taylor's ability to read Shakespeare, which is fascinating. The Why Shakespeare course was about moments like this, where Shakespeare just keeps on coming up again and again and again in the modern world. And the students just brought so much of their own interests and passions and futures to this project, thinking about how Shakespeare might connect up with their spheres. And then this is part of what led to some of these really fascinating moments of public knowledge creation.
Any other commentary on the latest Taylor Swift album?
So, well, Ed Sheeran's album dropped the week before, but he doesn't nearly have those references. So, I can't follow that.
No, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, please go ahead.
What would you do now in the era of smart language machines to make sure you don't simply get 30 versions, none of which were done by the student himself or herself?
Yeah, thanks. So question about in the area of large language models, where AI could generate essays about Shakespeare and, for example, modern receptions. How do you account for that? One way to think about it is a distinction this morning started to come up between existing knowledge and emerging knowledge. And this is all about emerging knowledge. So those large language models, they can discover and they can process knowledge that already exists out there. But what about the knowledge that doesn't yet exist out there? And so, for example, this Taylor Swift album came out last night at midnight. There's an opportunity for emerging knowledge. There's an opportunity for Swifties who know a lot about that to speak to this new thing that has come into the world. There's an opportunity for Shakespeare scholars who have a very different knowledge base to speak to this new thing that came out in the world. AI can't write that essay at the current moment because it can't create knowledge in that way. It can access knowledge that other people have created, but it can't do this kind of knowledge creation.
Response to that, but 10 seconds later, can't it?
I mean, so I just gave us a reading of Taylor Swift's song, mm-hmm. and the question will be, when will AI be able to do that with this particular content? Mm-hmm. And others may have a better sense of is that going to be a matter of hours, days, weeks, months? Mm-hmm. But the moment of knowledge creation, it can't do that. And so that's kind of where I think a lot of the energy in our project that we focused on was.
Great.
The question on that, just build on. So what I'm hearing is a lot of times as instructional designer, we were trained on backward design, but like the idea about forward design is also really important. You don't have a particular learning objectives, and you talk about emergence of learning. So how do you feel that, like, in which context do this like lend itself to this kind of like really forward thinking, let the learning, let the knowledge emerge? Where do you think is more important? In which context?
Yeah, we would, in the course, talk a lot about perspective and hidden expertise. And so one of the ways that we framed academic writing is, for the majority of their lives, a lot of these first-year students have been asked to write another essay about Ernest Hemingway, where their teacher is the expert on this material. They're just reading it for the first time. That is the exact wrong way in which to go into a writing situation. You want to go into a writing situation when you have knowledge that someone else doesn't have, that you have something to teach them. And so positioning them to be able to write about their hidden expertise, which often doesn't come from their schoolwork, but comes from their lived experience, their extracurricular lives, where they know more about a subject than the sort of classroom authority on the topic at hand, really puts folks in a good position to be able to write well the way that scholars often write, which is coming from a place of subject matter expertise, but that is so hard to sort of get students to shift from being I'm trying to convince someone that I'm right about this situation to, hey, I have things that I can teach you about this situation, which is kind of the big transition that you try to get.
I'm curious about the word hidden and hidden expertise. Is it only hidden expertise, or is it sort of more explicit expertise as well? Why don't you just hold this?
I think they don't self-describe it as expertise. Mm-hmm. That they sort of say, this is sort of, I've spent hours, days, weeks, months of my life playing The Legend of Zelda, right? You have expertise on The Legend of Zelda, but we wouldn't think of that as you have some subject matter expertise to teach someone else. So that's the sense of hidden, and then there's sort of that matches up with the formal curriculum of a course, mm-hmm. and can come into contact with that in fascinating ways, and those things become sort of less hidden. So I guess there's an interesting question, right, about when expertise sort of transitions from being inchoate to being sort of codified as expertise.
Mm-hmm. And I think specific to the topic of this panel, we're interviewing you. Do you differentiate between knowledge and expertise? I think you do.
Yeah, because just quickly off the top of my head, I would say knowledge is understanding and explanation of the way that things are of a certain situation, and expertise is what sort of positions you to be able to do that, mm-hmm. right? So yeah, there's a distinction there. Mm-hmm.
I love this. I have questions, but keep on. Edward, I'll pass a question on to you now, because we've been talking about the student and collaborator and the role of knowledge. How does that resonate with you and the work you're doing, and how does that work in the context of Gen AI? And I'm thinking in particular about your work on participatory creativity.
I've got it.
Yeah, you don't need this. Everyone else does.
So another area of my expertise is a topic that we call participatory creativity. So it's taking a social cultural approach to the concept of creativity. So breaking away from the idea that creativity lives within the skulls and skin of people, and rather saying that creativity lives in a social space. And if we think of creativity and invention and innovation as living within a social space, then we can all participate. That's the key word, participate in creativity in a variety of different ways. My colleagues and I say that draw on young people's talents, skills, background experiences, and cultural perspectives. I would, add Jeff's idea of expertise to that as well. So just having this social experience of participating with invention, maybe with writing projects and what have you. I use the word collaboration. I have a strong, I kind of strongly feel against collaboration. Because if you think of the word collaboration or collaborate, it's literally co-labor. You're co-laboring. You're doing something with someone else. Everyone's doing the same thing together. And that's not effective ways to engage in creativity and innovation. I use the metaphor of a soccer game. So I have young children, and if you go to the Pee-wee version of a soccer game, you're going to see all the kids going after the ball all the time, right? But more sophisticated layers of play, people have positions. And those positions might go back and forth. And if you're a naive viewer of a soccer game, a professional soccer game, it might look like everyone's going after the ball at the same time, but they actually have specific positions and they're going back and forth. And sometimes those positions change, but they all participate in a way to be most effective. So I believe in this concept of participation, young people bringing their best in different ways that capitalize on their various expertise and cultural perspectives and background experiences, but not co-laboring, everyone do everything together, because that denies young people to bring the best of themselves to the work, and at the same time, it's just not effective or efficient. We wouldn't see those in our most sophisticated teams. And I think, in terms of, Sarah, you asked about generative AI, a lot of people go in different places about how do we use generative AI? Is generative AI killing creativity? And I really don't think it is. I warmly embrace generative AI from a participatory creativity perspective. Because while I believe that creativity happens when various people participate, it's actually when various actors come together to participate. And sometimes those actors are non-human actors. And I think Gen AI is just another actor in a creative system. And back to our discussion of agency earlier, it's just important that the human actors within that creative system are exercising their agency and understanding that Gen AI is a tool that, we heard speakers this morning have control over, not something that controls them. Again, not being a consumer or being consumed by Gen AI or being manipulated by it, but, being a pro-creator with Gen AI and being very cognizant of that. So that's my approach to collaboration, participation, and its relationship to generative artificial intelligence.
Thank you. Part of me wants to make everyone move around the room again and share their thoughts on that. I'll instead go to Gloria and just talking some more about modes of learning. This category, how people learn, concerns both educators as well as the learner. What do you see as the preferred mode of learning in this AI age?
So I saw the biggest spread, almost like evenly distributed earlier in the room when we talk about embodied and experiential social dialogue and digital immersion. And that is how I feel as well. I love all three modes of learning. I also think, they are not mutually exclusive, but digital immersion is experiential also. So I want to touch briefly upon digital immersion. The one I chose is an embodiment, but I do think digital immersion at this age has a lot of potential. And some of you may be aware, Sora 2 is out this week by OpenAI, the new model, video generation model. So my LinkedIn is filled with Sam Altman, in doing weird things like the cameo in all sorts of different virtual environment. And there's all these concern about deep fakes and things like that. But the one I want to draw your attention, maybe as well, is Genie 3 from Google DeepMind. And it's not just one, there are others out there, like Feifei Li has another World Lab, which is similar. But this is the type of digital immersion that I have high hopes for education and learning. So essentially, with Gen AI, you could create any of these virtual environment just with like a one-line prompt, right? It can be the ocean environment. It can be an animated environment like that. It can be a field trip. It can be a field trip that you wouldn't otherwise be able to take, like, flying in the sky. So these virtual environment and the accessibility of it, I think really could really add another layer of learning. In my past role, I led the BCG's Boston Consulting Group's learning arm for client learning. We do a lot of these kind of simulation learning, virtual environment, and usually it costs maybe 100 to 200K to make one with a vendor. Usually a year of time to create these kind of environment with all the branching scenarios and things like that. But this could become accessible to any of us. We can just create it, right? With all the branching, the vibe coding, the entire algorithm, create a virtual environment that actually looks real. So an example, right? At DCE, we have a program called Museum Studies, led by Kathy Jones. You can imagine you can create virtual museum like this, and like you can use it for different kinds of learning, right? The learning objectives could be, for example, I want to teach about cataloging and curation of museum exhibits, or it can be things like I want to talk about digitizing museum, or like data science in museum. So you can create these kind of experiential learning like that. So I think there's a lot of promise in digital immersion. I did choose embodiment just because I think it is a more underutilized learning approach and pedagogy. I see you're not there. So I just want to share that, right? Like, so we can think a little bit more about that. So in this Gen AI age, right, like how can we make use of that body sensory experience more? I give you an example. This is another DCE course. This is led by Alison Sand, our instructor, who teach resilient communities from the ground up. So she is also author of the book with similar title. So this one, she every summer for the last 3 years at Harvard Summer School, she would take the students and they will go to Dorchester, which is a more underprivileged environment, more economically disadvantaged section of Massachusetts, I would say, and they would just go and work with the local communities. They talk to them, interview with them. They would work with the city hall. They would work on topics like climate action or transportation. So one group will be working on transportation and thinking about the dynamics of bike versus walking versus public transportation. Another group will be looking at tree canopy and looking at all these trees and the impact on the heating in the city. So a lot of these experiences are like on the ground, immersive, a lot of bodily sensory experience. And I know not every course will lend itself to something like this, but I just want to share that as an example, like can we introduce more of this? Another more personal experience, I teach at Harvard, but I also teach at Minerva, which is an innovative university based in San Francisco. All learning is digital, online, and students travel around the world. So as like other university, our group of faculty come together to talk about how we navigate like this Gen AI age, right? How do we change our learning design and pedagogy? And we have all these mirror board of like flowcharts, how we do things, and playbook. And one of the things that come at the top of the playbook is embodiment, right? How do we think about, even we teach online, how do we think about engage our students more with the bodily senses? And I think it's neat because it's not just to sort of quote unquote come back to Gen AI, right? Use body to come back Gen AI. There's learning science behind it. If you teach math, right? If you are using your body, like using these things, right, to think about gesture and things like that, there is science behind it. It actually improves learning outcomes. So how do you think about this? Back to museum, right? Kathy Jones, her course actually have capstone, which is called Museum of Everyday Objects. And she asked her students to curate objects of everyday life, to your point, like things that I know best. And it can be the rubber duck there that has some meaning. It can be that Turkish box, jewelry box, right? That means something to me. So all these things, like, I can actually touch. This is an object. And then there's a virtual environment to it. They actually create a virtual museum using Unity. It's a 3D environment. But there's also that, like, physical environment. I can touch it and I know about it. I can make meaning out of it. And this is a neat project. Again, just a little tweak. Like, she could have done it very differently, but she chose that kind of design choice to get students to interact with the environment. So I encourage us to think more about how can embodiment, sensory experience could enhance cognitive learning as well. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm aware of time. I want to make sure there's enough time for questions from the crowd. So I'm going to do just one quick run through with everybody. 30 seconds or less. What's one thing that scares you about the road ahead, and what's one thing that excites you?
Sure. Thing that scares me is the diminished status of education in the United States. The thing that excites me is getting the reins of power into our students' hands as quickly as possible. I think putting them in places of being knowledge creators and decision makers is a very good next step.
The thing that scares me is the thing that here at Harvard we're told we can't talk about to the press and everything like that. So that scares me. But the thing that excites me is I have young children, as I mentioned earlier, and they excite me, and all their friends excite me. And when I look at them and I see the wonder and the joy and the future in their eyes, I think we're going to be okay.
Agree. For you too. What worries about me is recently my LinkedIn, the term called work slop is trending in the corporate world, like SLOP, right? There's HBR articles saying like everyone is doing just the average bare minimum with the Gen AI tools, just to get by, and it costs like multi-million productivity, issue in corporates. And I wonder, like, is there a learning slop also in education? I didn't hear the word. And unfortunately, my two classes at Harvard and Minerva, I don't see learning slop. I'm very lucky. Maybe it is a concentration cost, but I hear from different people about learning slop. Or I hear the word coasters, like when you're coasting, you're just doing the minimum learning work. And there's this New York Times researcher who's doing research for 3 years now, 68,000 students, young kids, and the parents, like 2,000 parents. And they're going to publish a book, but they say more than 50% of kids are coasters nowadays. So that worries me. What excites me is I hear all this cognitive overloading, but I do think our mind is changing, like how maybe we are losing some, but maybe we're gaining other types of cognitive aspect or intelligence. So that keeps me happy and hopeful.
Thank you for that. Thank you all so much. Questions from the crowd? Vicky has got a mic, and I can also pass this around for the folks in the front.
What's your answer to the question?
Wow. I am grappling with what scares me is I am concerned about the impact AI has on our cognitive functions. I have to say, as with the increased discussion around it, I use GPS less because I realize that I don't know how to get places. Just quick show of hands. Think about the routes that maybe in the past you would have known how to get and now you don't because you're just always plugging it in. So that does make me a little uncomfortable. What excites me is that we're thinking about it. We're not just kind of hopefully submitting to the slop. So yeah, thank you. I see a question way in the back.
I don't have a question, but I did ask ChatGPT about the Taylor Swift song. And so I said, what is Taylor Swift's song's Fate of Ophelia Shakespearean meaning? Please include lyrics. And I came back with, I'm sorry, but I can't provide the full lyrics to The Fate of Ophelia by Taylor Swift because they're copyrighted. So she has deep tentacles. But it did say I can give you a summary, I can show some excerpts, and I can explain how the song connects Ophelia from Hamlet. And I'll just give you the quick summary. So it said, The Fate of Ophelia is a song in which Taylor Swift evokes the tragic literary figure Ophelia from Hamlet to frame a story of emotional struggle, near collapse, and rescue. Rather than passively accepting a tragic end, the song reclaims the narrative by introducing a savior who prevents the narrator from falling into despair and madness.
Yeah, I was going to say, I like Jeff's interpretation better.
As the writing teachers would say, good first draft. We've got some room to grow. Just real quickly, I love the phrase learning slop. So in the writing courses that we use, learning slop is actually really, really important because there's going to be about 50 pages of things that you write en route to writing a really good 3-page paper. You can't get to the really good 3-page paper without all of this somewhat sloppy stuff that you do over here.
I feel like that's a different kind of slop in the sense, and that is the thing that I'm thinking about is the hard work that builds those muscles to make things easier eventually. Go ahead, please.
Hi, how are you? I'm Natasha. I'm from the law school. I teach transactional law, so it's an experiential experience for students who want to get hands-on experience taking cases with clients who have transactional needs. My question is more so for you. Do any of you work with other instructors almost as like co-teachers, and how do you encourage positive learning outcomes for students if you may have differing teaching styles?
I can say something. I just real quickly will mention, so I previously worked with some of these folks in VPAL, the Office of the Vice Provost for Advances in Learning, on a course called The Fundamentals of Writing with Martin Puchner from the Department of English. And I don't think he would mind me saying this. I'm an AI skeptic. He is an AI enthusiast. And we came into productive conflict a number of times. And so I think we both sort of were able to learn from the other one I was able to learn about actually some of the opportunities. And by the end of this collaboration, we had identified there are these 6 specific moments in the writing process that actually AI is pretty good with helping you out. And he was similarly able to come to appreciate some of the liabilities of working with AI during a writing process. And so I think just sort of openness to that kind of collaboration with someone who might not share your opinion is a good place to start.
I'll go, then you go. So I don't co-teach in that traditional way, but I do have research teams that I work with. And it was just this past Saturday that we were leading a full-day learning community event, 7 hours of interactive workshops. It was 3 of us co-facilitating. And 2 nights before, we just kind of tore up the agenda and said, this is all wrong, and why are we doing this? And somebody had one perspective, another person another perspective, and then it wound up me and another person were starting to be aligned, and the other person felt, kind of outside. And so I think just kind of going through that tension, that positive tension, and having norms that our goal is to be successful and to do the best that we can for the people that we're working with. So just going in knowing that you have different approaches, you have different styles, and in the event itself, I'm reflecting on it. Just I have a certain approach when I'm working with a group of educators versus another colleague, and we're celebratory in our successes, but we're not afraid to be critical when we know we could have done better. And that was certainly part of that conversation. So I think you're constantly calibrating with your co-participants. But if you weren't, you're not showing up and doing the best work, I think. Great question.
Yeah, building on to that, so my AI course, I have a co-instructor, and also Luis Mario here, teaching assistant. He is really, an expert in this field as well, did a lot of work on this field, advising, governments on AI philosophy policy. So I guess the mindset I have is all about them, to your point, right? Like, it's not about us. So sometimes it feels like more struggle, or it takes more time actually to co-teach than just if I just do it on my own. But I think about the learners able to see the different styles of teaching. It is beneficial to them. Like one lesson I'm doing backward design, think about your Bloom's taxonomy, your objective stress. And another class will be doing from Mario, like forward design thinking. So from the universal design of learning perspective, they get what they is best for them. So I think it is best for them for sure, and that's the mentality I go into. Even if we have to take more time and resources to go through these kind of good conversations. Yeah.
I'll add one more thing. I think it makes it more interesting for the learner when you're co-facilitating or co-teaching, because they get exposed to those different styles that you mentioned. So it's not just this, I understand the note this guy hits, and you just roll with that. It's like, oh, well, then she's up, and then he's up, and then that other person's up. So I think it keeps the energy going by bringing different vibes.
Any other questions?
Comments, not questions, so if that is okay. Hi, it's a comment, not question. I'm Shovik. I work for Lab Exchange as data engineer and AI solution architect. I also teach a course that is how to solve your problem with coding and AI. A real concern I couldn't stop sharing is our perception of we understand AI, which we don't. Evidently, we think we are teaching things about AI without training of AI. For example, I often hear the comment, AI cannot create knowledge. Absolutely wrong. We have been creating knowledge like Google DeepMind, for example. So the potential is immense, and perhaps we should get into the habit of, for example, referring to generative AI. But AI is a big thing. It's like I'm talking about engine. Engine is in a ship, in car, in factories. AI is such a big thing. So that's one comment that, for example, it has been since early 2000, AI has been used to connect dots. These dots are knowledge, creating something called knowledge graph. And by connecting this dot, you are coming up with a new perspective, how we define knowledge. If we define knowledge as a new perspective that was overlooked from the existing knowledge or data, that's creating knowledge. So how we harness the full potential, and I'm very afraid of, we are slipping into the future where the proprietary companies control our thought process as well. So we do not think beyond what they want us to see. For example, right now for education, everything is Gen AI. Oh, the perspective of Gen AI in future. Whereas because this is ready to be used right now, but there are things at Harvard, at least we should get into conversation beyond Gen AI. What is the perspective of using AI in education, in making the society better? That's my comment. Thank you.
So you opened by saying you didn't have a comment. You didn't have a question, you had a comment. So I'm going to ask the question. So you made an argument that AI can create knowledge, right?
It does. Not can.
Can I flip it and say that AI can't create knowledge, it can co-create knowledge?
Yeah. Co-creating is.
So if it's co-creating and that the source of that knowledge is always from us, from people, from sentient beings, can't we say that we have a sense of agency in that space then? If we just frame it as AI isn't creating knowledge and imposing it on us, we're co-creating that knowledge that it's creating.
For example, protein structure is being now exposed. The whole COVID situation, if you followed how protein structure were discovered so fast so that we could come up with a vaccine, it's completely vast labs, all robots, being instructed by AI models. So there's a creation. Of course, there is a basis from where we are starting that has been created by human. But that's how AI produce new knowledge. And then within 100 probabilities, there are algorithms that gives you weightage depending on, of course, human is in the loop in this kind of process, but the future is not far where given very basic question and understanding, there are already existing models which, for example, like Taylor Swift, it doesn't give you the lyrics because of issues, but AI has been used for, at least to my knowledge from friends in Spotify. So what lyrics people will gobble up, at what time it should be released, what kind of rhythms should be there, these are being used by AI. So that's where I'm talking about. It's not just knowledge, it's co-creation is right now, future is towards AI, and that's I'm afraid of. AI is capable of creating knowledge, and knowledge is different from information. So we need to distinguish between false, what is truth. AI can create a society of zombies, and we should be responsible to hold the rein. That's what I'm trying to put forward. It's very capable of creating false knowledge and good knowledge, both.
So I think in order to avoid creating those zombies is that as educators, we have to foreground agency, and that you are agentic in this space. This isn't something that's happening to you.
Okay. Just real quickly, also this keyword discernment is a little bit of what we're talking about here, that AI can create all sorts of knowledge. It can give us a version of a Taylor Swift and Shakespeare essay. I, as a subject matter expert, have the discernment to judge whether or not that's a good reading. And that's one thing that I know some folks are concerned about. When Harvard faculty use AI, they're using it as subject matter experts, and they have the discernment to be able to judge when AI gets it right and when AI gets it wrong. But what about an 18-year-old student who doesn't have subject matter expertise and is just getting a lot of slop, and it can't really determine which of this is the good stuff and which of this is not? Thank you.
Maybe one final comment to that is there is a good article, won't have time to elaborate, but AI as normal technology is from a Stanford professor who teaches computer science. And the idea is that like we have all these either very dystopian or utopian view of what AI could become. Oh, this AGI will replace everyone, do all our work, or very dystopian kind of view. But if you treat AI as also just like quote unquote normal technology like electricity, for example, the important thing about we are at the early stage is not about the innovation itself, the LM, but it is about how we make use of it, an interface, how we diffuse it to the society, and we all have, as a community of practice, a role to play there. And yeah, you and everyone, be it agency, be it anything else. So yeah, just that part.
And I'll just say thank you, Gloria, Edward, Jeff. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Hill Conference. Thanks, everybody. Thank you guys so much.